Good morning, everybody. How are you? Happy Monday. Hope you had a good weekend. Saffron, welcome in. And Heidi, no tsunamis. Bonch, salutations. How are you? Welcome in. Working on some patterns this morning, huh, Saf? All right. Greetings from frigid Maryland. It's like it's a middling, dark, sopping wet day here in Portland. Not too cold. Not too frigid. You like some frigid weather. What's up, Javar? Squishy hugs, right? Yeah, no doubt. So, I know it's a holiday, and a lot of people got the day off, but I figured, hey, why not hang out for a little bit and do some learning, and not work on anything that involves a deadline. I thought that might be kind of a nice change. Catch up on our Discord a bit. I'm going to kill this noise in the background here. Nate! What's up, dude? Happy Monday, homie. Hope you're doing well. The lean machine, drone machine from Zamerit's post here. I want to hear this. This looks very familiar. Shall we needle drop and see where it goes? Electronic muscle exerciser. I like that. Knob tweaker. The lean machine. I like the whatever this is, a piggy or something. Welcome into all the new homies. Oh, Whiskey missed us the other day. We're going to probably get to meet Whiskey. How about that? So, Saf, are you giving the endorsement to the surfaces here? Oh, my goodness. Voxman's Nate got a new puppy. Or a kitty. Adorbs. Trem ties. Did you just stumble into Manipulator? Because it is, man, it's really something. That's some good stuff there. Nate! Nate is here. Nice, Saf. Good to be focused. Good to be focused. Drill down into some stuff. What's up, Samarits? We get to meet Whiskey. Yeah. I love Whiskey. Ooh, Whiskey should make a track called the Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. That's a great idea. I wish there was a way to pin stuff from oh wait, hold on a second. let's get this whole thing. Ah, it's moving. It's really hard to screenshot a chat that's moving. All right, so we're going to post this here. And we'll tag Whiskey in this. Oops. Hey, why can't I delete you? Thank you. It's a good idea, Paul. Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. Oh, man. Nate. Yeah, COVID. I wish it would just die already. Hey, Berfeldi, I bet you get such better options than we do over here. In regards to the single malts, I mean. Nate, dude, get some rest. Chill. Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. WTF. Did you get yourself tested, Nate? All right, so learning. I figured we could do some of that today. DJ Empirical's in the house. What's up, dude? How are you? Yeah, I hate being sick. Do not like it. Do not like it. Never have. Don't plan on liking it anytime soon. All right, so last week we did, I guess it may have been the end of the week prior and the beginning of last week. But anyway, we talked the very, very basics, right, of what sound actually is, right? And then we touched on envelopes, right? Attack, decay, sustain, and release. And we touched on the importance of including noise and silence and space in the conversation about what is sound, because the traditional definition or technical definition of sound, which is just amplitude, pitch, and timbre, simply is not sufficient for our needs. So just adding noise and silence and space. And then after we touched on the basics of envelopes, we kind of stopped there. There was a brief mention of what specifically subtractive synthesis is, as we were tackling a couple of questions. But that's kind of where we left off. So I figured we could pick up there and we could start rolling through like maybe just a quick understanding of what the basic main types of synthesis actually are. And then kind of going in and talking a bit more in depth about the individual waveforms in conjunction with filters and modulation, because I think that we can move through that chunk of it fairly quickly. We look at synthesis all the time, but it'd be good to just kind of briefly talk through what is actually happening. So if people are having questions out there, they can have those cleared up. Oh, dude, DJ, that's exactly where I am as well. Like, it's a day off. So I figured I would spend a couple of hours with you guys, do some learning, catch up with you. And then I'm going to kind of scrub through my inbox a bit and send out a bunch of invoices and that kind of stuff. There's no way I'm getting caught up, but I'm going to try. Try to attend to some of the more important things. Get caught up on my direct messages from folks. Yeah, that's what a day off is these days. Ribeye Korean beef, huh, Saf? How'd it turn out? Trailer's here. What's up, dude? Some merits. That is a great rule of thumb. I always have a hot whiskey as soon as I have two coughs in a row. It's a great rule of thumb. Yeah, Nate, I hear that. It's all about the at-home tests here too. That's really the only option you really have. Homeschooling. I was homeschooled. Trailer, yeah. So this is the basic outline. Nate would recognize this. This is a basic outline that I built for curriculum for PeerMind, actually. I had built curriculum for a couple of other places, but in looking through what was in each, I felt like this was the closest to like a distillation of my whole approach to all of this. It's just a little bit different. It approaches it all from a slightly different angle than most folks do, and it follows a timeline. It follows the timeline in which all of these tools and stuff were introduced. So you're kind of learning one concept and then adding on one little piece to it and adding on another little piece to it the way that we did in real time rather than just jumping into the deep end and trying to sort through all of the language and concepts and stuff all at once. So it makes it a bit easier. All right. So when we talked about the basic waveforms last week, we talked about envelopes. I gave a couple of really brief examples of shaping something with an envelope, but I want to introduce filters into that conversation now because what you modulate and how you shape your sound has a pretty profound impact upon it. What is actually being disclosed in the amount of time that it's being presented, what happens in our perception of that sound, what are the unique characteristics of doing it one way versus another way. So it's a good kind of rooting to have at the very beginning of your synthesis exploration, I think. Because that way, no matter what tool you're approaching, you know how to start shaping your sound. And if you can get the shape of your sound before you do anything else, then it leaves you free to find the timbre in a really organic way. And when you think about other parts of music making, we kind of apply the same kind of a concept. So it should feel pretty natural, but like a lot of people just knock out a quick melody idea with a piano, right? And then they go and they try to find the right instrument because they're working with MIDI. So piano kind of becomes their go-to placeholder, or maybe they're a guitarist. So plucking out a couple of ideas really quick is how they usually start a song. Same concept here, right? We carve out the shape of what we're looking for, and then we kind of slowly get into the timbre that we're looking for. It helps you kind of alleviate the feeling of having to manage a tool, right? And gets you right into the the creative stuff again as quickly as possible. So let's just do that. And let's use something both visual and non-visual. So we'll do this in two different tools at the same time. Let's put massive on one and serum on the other. And we'll do the one without the visual aid first. And we'll do the one with the visual aid second. So we'll call this massive. And we'll call this one serum. I think most around here probably have these two synths in their arsenal. And I can make serum a little bit bigger here, but I can't resize massive. So we'll just kind of have to grin and bear it with that one. And we can do this with like maybe a sawtooth to begin with so you guys can hear it clearly. Oh man. Yeah, going over the same exact outline, right, Nate? Oh, Paul, that just brought back memories. I'm just reading your comment about learned my dad was the most animated blackboard eraser I had ever seen. Um, you know, Iron Imp, I've actually taken down almost all of the tutorials and masterclasses. There is still one masterclass up for alchemy that we did as Sound Freaks a few years back. But right before the pandemic started, I was about to ramp up a whole new network revolving around education stuff and kind of rebooting the OhmLab experience again. And then the world went completely sideways. And for various reasons, refocused. Again, started spending more time on Audio Design Desk. And I don't really want to talk about the details of what's coming next, but all of that will be coming back just in a much bigger and more connected way. So most of the educational content is gone right now. We're going to roll through this as a group right now, and I would love for everyone to kind of huddle up on Discord around this stuff when there are questions or like aha moments or whatever offline between streams, because I feel like it's the social component of all of this that really helps keep people juiced, right? Like as we're all discovering and like finally comprehending certain things. Like, look, there are lots of things that we either kind of stumbled around with until we got good enough with it, like we figured out what we needed to with it, right? We may not know the technical jargon for that one specific thing, but we get by, right? There are other things that we were afraid to ask about for various reasons. There are things that are just like way off our radar and we're completely out of our element around, right? But regardless, they're like the person next to you in this community is going to have experience with that. And the person next to them is not. And it's great if we can all just kind of get together around all this kind of stuff. And just simple conversations lead to profound places sometimes. So it's good to revisit these basics as a group and do this. So the educational stuff is not for sale right now, Iron Imp, to get back to your question, but we will be doing this as a group. There will be classes and master classes and all that kind of stuff later. And there will also be new like certification courses as well. So all the stuff is coming back. It's just not right now. Blackberry, what's up, dude? Oh, Eric Kunel, yeah. Yeah. There's a brilliant mind for you, right? A lot of brilliant minds in the Pyramid fam. Yeah, Saf was actually getting some private tuition for some time. I've just had to pause his too. Everybody is currently paused. All right, cool. So back to basics, right? We're only going to touch the basic sine, square or pulse, triangle, and sawtooth. Okay, and we'll do each thing in a synth where we cannot see a waveform or an envelope, like in motion, and then we'll do it in serum where we can. It's good to use our ears. So just talking the envelope basics, and about how everything that we perceive is basically controlled through an envelope experience, right? Like we can either experience something that's very sudden, instantaneous, or something that takes a long time to build. Some things are sustained, some things are short-lived, and we can correlate all of these things to envelope terminology, just everyday mundane things, right? We can think about how crunchy a tortilla chip is in our mouth, right? Okay, very like transient, sharp sound. The more you start to apply it to all of these random thoughts that you have during the day, the better. All right, so without further ado, let's shape our sound, our waveform, into four main sounds. Oops, where's my document here? I'm not sure if it's in this week or if it's supposed to be next week. But I think it can be in this week. Basically, just the four main types of sounds that most of you would be dealing with music. Okay, so you've got a bass, and you've got a lead, and you've got a pad, right? And you've probably got some sort of a perk too, right? It'd be good if I can find this on the document really quick, because we'll paste each section into the Discord as we go. Bass, leads or plucks, pads, and effects is how I have them broken up here. I guess that's fair because plucks are perks. So bass, leads, pads, and effects. And the reason why I broke them up that way is because it leaves it in this kind of, I don't know, ambiguous place. And that's where we are with sound. That's where we are with sampling and synthesis. It's where we are with everything. So it'd be great if you can leave like the core archetypes in your mind to be this kind of malleable, self-assignable kind of status. Okay, so bass, leads or plucks, pads, and effects. So we're going to make an example of each one of those, and we're going to use an envelope to do it. But we're going to do it in two different ways. We're going to do it by shaping through amplitude, and then we're going to do it through shaping through filter, through frequency, okay? Because those are two core components of sound, right? It's amplitude, pitch, and timbre. So we're going to see how the timbre is affected when we do it each way. All right, by default, envelope 4 is the amp envelope inside of Massive. So we've got this sawtooth. And if I set this with a really sharp attack and a really sharp release, I'll get a click which isn't good. But that's about as sharp as you can get, attack-wise. And if I was to take my my sustain level down, wait a minute. It is envelope 4, right? That's amp, right? Yeah. Oh, I'm playing Serum. God, dang it. Sorry about that. Okay, so here we are. Sawtooth, they sound the same. And I'm going to bring down my sustain level. Okay, so I've got like this super, super short pluck. So this is how arbitrary assigning sound types is most of the time. If we're looking at the difference between a bass and a lead, when we're talking shape, there's really no difference. It's more about how you intend to use the sound. If I was to drop the pitch down, I get a bass. And if I take the pitch up, I get something that we would typically call like a lead type sound, right? So totally arbitrary in that sense. And it's really good to remember that. It's really good to keep the mindset open like that, because as you're designing your sounds, once you get to the timbre portion of the sound design process, you should feel like it's beneficial to be listening to your sound at different octaves. Like try them out across like 5 or 6 octaves and see how they perform differently in those different ranges, because you might be knocking out an instrument that's just as good or even better at a different octave than you were intending. And you don't want to cheat yourself out of that gold, right? So that's number one. Now, number two is what happens when we are doing this through shaping our sound through frequency rather than just amplitude. How does it affect the timbre? All right, so here's our sound. I'm going to go down 1 octave. Okay, so if you listen to it, it's got a click. We'll get rid of that click. But it's just very plain. It starts, it stops, and there's really no change that happens in that time. Okay, so now let's send this through a filter, and I'm going to just bring my level up on this. So now we're going to do the entirety of our shaping through this filter. I'll use a different envelope for this because number 4 is controlling the amp, and we're just wanting to control this single parameter right now, which is the cutoff of our filter. And I'm going to give it the same exact shape that we were just playing with. But the first thing that you'll notice is that it's not a static sound. In fact, there's pitch change in it. And if we were to add just a little bit of resonance, which is simply an accent at the point of cutoff, it intensifies that, it accents that, because it is an accent, right? So now it's more discernible as that sound is being delivered. This is the same exact shape, it's the same exact waveform, but we're shaping it through frequency rather than amplitude. And it has a profound effect on the timbre. And if we were to disclose that shape, what is being disclosed in that amount of time, if we were to increase that time? There's quite a bit more that's happening than just shaping through amplitude. There is amplitude shaping there. There is a gradual decay of amplitude as it goes down. But It's as the frequencies are moving, like as the cutoff is moving across those frequencies. Now, if we were to increase our attack, we're going to hear the amplitude or the cutoff increase and then decrease. So it'll disclose more frequencies and then it will attenuate more frequencies. And if we were to do that same exact thing, I will even copy this and take it over to our amp envelope here. I'm just now going to paste that. So now it's the same exact shape. And this is what it sounds like. You hear how there's just no change? It's just the amplitude changing. So that is the bare bone basics of like the implications of shaping through frequency versus shaping through amplitude. And there's absolutely a time to do both. And it really, truly depends upon what you're trying to create in regards to which one is the appropriate one for that sound. Anybody got any questions about the filter stuff? Yeah, I hear you, Iron Imp. I am also a bookworm. I like to have the ability to just drill down into knowledge. Hey, Blackberry celebrated his first month as a Twitch streamer yesterday. Congrats, dude. How's it going over there? I've only been able to make one live. It is a fun refresher going through all that stuff. Oh, Natalie Wood, right, Paul? Man. Oh, Madeline. Goodness. All right. That's really good to hear, Blackberry. All right, so let's just explore really quickly the timbre of frequency shaping, or the effects with frequency shaping on the different waveforms, because this can actually be fairly eye-opening. I'm going to set my amp envelope back up, and we're going to turn back on the filter. We're going to listen to the same sound with a square wave. Now, this was a sawtooth. Actually, I'll play a second sawtooth really quick. And back to the first. Now, those two might sound exactly the same to a lot of you, and they won't. If you actually go through this whole process, they won't sound the same to you anymore, which is a pretty cool thing to be able to distinguish those two from each other. We're going to move this over to a square wave. This is halfway between a square wave and a sawtooth. And now a full square. So let's just talk about what we're actually hearing here, okay? Because this is the most important part of this entire process, is stopping and having this small conversation as you're working through each type of synthesis, working through each type of filter, working through each type of modulation, working through each waveform. You stop and you have this little conversation with yourself. What is it that I'm actually hearing? One of the very first things that I think of and I feel each time I move from a sawtooth to a square is that it just got hollowed out or something. It's like a tube in comparison to the sawtooth. So right there, that one word, hollow or tube, we've all tried to put words to those kind of hollow Reese bases, right? Or tubular, funky Devo bases, right? And yet we might reach for a sawtooth because we're thinking, oh, it just has such a nasty edge to it. All you have to do is go down one octave to get those chunky little edges. And halfway in between, you're getting both the hollow and that chunky. If you move back over, there's that kind of hollow, resonant characteristic that I'm talking about. Now, if we were to go and shorten our decay again and our attack, right? These are like two fairly iconic sounds, really. And they are just pure waveforms. One is a square and one is a saw. It's the same exact shape, And starting to mess it up by kind of blending these two waveforms together, obviously starts to impart characteristics of both, right? So when you hear something on the radio, right, it's got mostly kind of a hollow, resonant appeal to it, but it's got this kind of chunky edge, then chances are you're dealing with a square dominant square saw combination of some sort. Another option might be that it's a square wave with a little bit of saturation put on it. But just listening to this versus this, there's a discernible difference. You just have to focus. And you really can hear the difference if you really start to focus on the individual characteristics and how they are being disclosed over time. And right now, it might be kind of difficult to be able to discern between those two. So all you have to do is extend time, right? Because then you can hear all of that information, all of the character changes being disclosed in a slower form, right? Or at a slower rate. So you can actually process it all. So let's just do that. Let's just increase the decay a bit. Okay, I'm going to take this down to a square and put our tube back on. Well, the first thing that I notice is the entirety of the sound, all of the frequencies, they're all being boosted simultaneously. It's not a matter of certain frequencies being highlighted as it's being disclosed. It's all of them at once. So that indicates to me that this is drive, this is saturation that's bringing that kind of edge to this sound. And if I was to turn that off and switch back over to just adding a little bit of square wave or sawtooth wave to my square wave, the signal is cleaner, so I can hear the fact that there is an accent on a series of frequencies as the sound is being disclosed. And then, like I was saying, if you go up a few octaves and just kind of get familiar with the kind of cause and effect of moving these two waveforms together. I'm going to bring my decay down again. So the sawtooth and the square wave, although they do have some similarities in the mid-range, they definitely set themselves apart from each other in the really high and the really low octaves again. All right, so then if we move over to the other side of the spectrum with the other two waveforms, we're looking at the sine and triangle, and these two are much more round. This is triangle, and this is sine. Let's just get rid of that click here. So sine wave is pretty hard to get across in a lot of situations without affecting it. Triangle has a little bit easier path to our ears, but it's hard to hear it down low. And if we go sine wave, same, and less harmonics, which is why we use it for sub bass, because it doesn't actually interfere with like the audible timbre of a mix, right? It's more about what you're feeling. Now, of course, once we start to bring other things into the equation like saturation and whatnot, things become much more complex because we're talking about introducing a lot of harmonics and stuff. Let's just really quickly look at that same sequence of things with serum, where it's a bit more visual and you can actually see the waveforms, which kind of inform how we're speaking about the sounds that we're hearing, right? Because when we look at a sine wave, it's round. There's no hard or sharp corners or edges anywhere, right? So it's just the nature of the beast, right? Just knowing how visual we are, it's constantly informing how we are perceiving things. And we can become a bit reliant or overly reliant upon visuals. When all we really need with sound, for the most part, when dialing in our timbre, are our ears, not our eyes. All right, so let's do that really quick. Envelope. Envelope 1 is the amp envelope inside of Serum. So let's just do this with the sawtooth here. So we're going to shape this into a pluck. Now we're just going to do it with a filter. So I'll just bring this up, and we'll do this with a separate filter just like we did before. Bring down sustain, bring our decay in just a little bit. And if we add just a little bit more resonance, so seeing what's happening with our EQ here with the filter and following the shape of this envelope and seeing the shape of this waveform, it becomes easier to kind of correlate shape and sound, right? And when you're tracking a filter change where you're seeing whatever amount of time, whether it's fleeting or sustained, the opportunity for frequencies to be allowed through, it's so much easier to wrap your mind around why a sound is coming together the way that it is, right? And why you should be reaching for frequency shaping over amplitude shaping in so many cases, because you can actually see it. Now, that's just the shape, right? And the shape is the easiest thing to arrive at. If we were trying to make a pad, we would, I'm just going to turn off our, we'll leave our filter on. We'll just do all of this through filter. I would bring my sustain up, but not all of the way. So there's some sort of a peak that my sound gets to, and then it kind of settles in. So I'm going to increase my attack here, and maybe I will increase my decay. So it's not this really rapid drop off to my sustain point. And I would also probably increase the release, because it would be a little weird to have a long attack and then just a nothing for release. It wouldn't feel very organic. So I'm going to put my release up as well. Oh, my amp envelope here. Menlikelao. I'm not sure how to say this name, but thank you so much for coming in. You can absolutely correct me in the chat, so I'm not butchering your name every time. Okay, so we did bass, we did pluck, right? Same. So pad, generally speaking, is going to have a shape that's a bit different, right? You're still going to have some sort of difference in sustain level, but it's not going to dip down to nothing, right? So there's no sharp pluck. It's all pretty smooth. Okay, so then there's effects, right? Your shapes are so fast. Your pluck, a couple of seconds. Your pad, a couple of seconds, really. After that, it's just timbre. Now, effects, it depends on what type of effect you're talking about. If it's a riser, it's going to be something that slowly opens, right? So what would that shape look like? Let's just move our attack over a bit. And maybe this is one of those situations. I was saying that a short release with a long attack doesn't feel very natural. But, you know, when you're talking about a sound effect, then maybe that's what you're going for. And if a riser is a slow disclosure of amplitude over time or frequency over time, it would sound like this. But amplitude and frequency or, you know, filter control aren't the only things that we can modulate. We can also modulate pitch. So we could take this envelope and we could put it up on pitch. The shape is done, right? Like getting the timbre right and getting the effects right after that, that's the next step. But getting the shape right is the very first thing, because then it just allows you to just focus on the timbre. You could put this into a mix right now, and the fundamental purpose of the sound is being delivered, right? So it already fits to a certain degree within the song. And the only thing that doesn't fit is the timbre. So listening to it in context now and working on it is going to get you to your sound a lot quicker, right? You're not trying to shape it and work on timbre at the same exact time. So one way in which you can get more consistent and work with more intention and work quicker and more intelligently is just to get the shape dialed in really quickly. There's a lot of other stuff that you can do with an effect, though, right? An effect is something that you would probably want to hold off on the processing toward the end after you already get the shape done. So let's just say you wanted to make something a bit more complex than this, right? Maybe you wanted to add some sort of, I don't know, amplitude modulation to this thing. And we already see that the filter is being modulated, the pitch is being modulated. We could bring our level up as well on our oscillator. And then we could use maybe an LFO with something kind of quick. As like a little accent or something, right? But that's still part of shape, right? That really is. It's part of shape. So if those are the main things that you know that you want, get them out first, and then you can work on the timbre, right? And you can go crazy with timbre. Timbre is something that is a never-ending playground. One of the best benefits of using this approach here is that after you get your muscle memory down of knowing how to make the specific type of pluck or pad or effect shape or whatever that you're going for, you can start saving those as presets. You know what I mean? And you can get quite specific in your naming of those presets, which means you could then have all of your favorite pluck styles for basses saved in one folder, and a whole nother folder of just pluck shapes for leads, right? Because really skinny tight plucks are really good for ARPs, right? That are going to have big reverbs and delays because you need these tiny, tiny little pinpricks of sounds. Versus a much thicker pluck is going to be better for something like a piano or something like that, right? So just knowing how to make all those different shapes is one thing. Saving them as presets, which speeds up your workflow, is another, because now you're only ever worrying about timbre, right? It's like this step-by-step process of just setting yourself up for really organic creation of sounds very quickly. And then that way you're not worried about managing your tools anymore, right? Or trying to figure out how to get the perfect shape for some keys or something. You already figured that out before. You were smart enough to save the preset. So now just focus on the timbre. Yeah, BlackBerry points out that some instruments have almost no decay release. The decay and release is usually a byproduct of the ambient environment and not the instrument. Absolutely. Absolutely. Ooh, making waves, the art of cinematic sound. Nice. Nice, Paul. Hmm. That's an interesting one. Paul is correlating the waveform shape to drill bits. Saw versus square, think if they were drill bits, what shape of hole would they make? Yeah, that's an interesting one. You can really truly apply all of this stuff to just about anything in life, which is what's really nice about this. Because everyone is going to think about this stuff in their own way, and that's brilliant. It's absolutely great. All right, so let's just dip back over to our document here really quick. Um, Basic waveforms, core elements. We've talked about oscillator and filters. We've talked about the 4 core synth instruments: the bass, the lead, the pad, and the effects. So I guess the next most natural thing to move into would be just the concept of noise, silence, and space being added to our sound. So this being an effect here, we would obviously want to make this much more interesting than it is. And we would want it to have more impact than it does right now. One of the very first things that you can do to your sounds to change the timbre pretty significantly is mess with their voicing, right? So by default, an oscillator is serving up one voice. And if you increase the unison, which is the number of voices being generated by one oscillator, so I'm going to take that down to just one voice again. One tone right down the middle. When I add a second one, though, you're going to hear it get really wide. And before we start getting weirder, let's just listen to the other waveform types in here. Here's a sine wave. Sawtooth. Triangle. Square. Another pulse. Another pulse. All right, so now I'm going to detune those voices a bit more. So as they get really far apart from each other, just listen really carefully. What's the voice on the left doing compared to the voice on the right? And this explains detuning for you. It's called detune because it's detuning the individual voices apart from one another, right? And a lot of synths will actually give you control over how much detuning is actually taking place. You can usually find that in the global settings or the advanced settings. But that's quite literally what detuning is doing, is it's detuning the individual voices that are being served up by one oscillator apart from each other. And then some interesting things start to happen. When they are the same, all that changes is an amplitude jump, right? Because it's increasing from one voice to two voices, but they're playing the exact same pitch, so they're not discernible from one another. You want to make them discernible from one another to start creating interest. And if you add another voice, it kind of blurs that detuning together. Until they're spread out even more, and now there's three different tones competing, so it's a bit more chaotic. And 4. And 5. So after you get above like 4, it's crosstown traffic, right? It's just a whole bunch of horns blaring in your ear. And that's really good to remember because there are not many situations where like 14 voices is going to be a really good, beneficial thing. It's going to have a certain kind of effect. It's going to have a certain kind of quality. And it's not going to be one that is intended to be very clear. It's meant to be big, right? So if we were to bring a whole bunch of voices like 8 in again, meaning less detuning, now it's actually pretty interesting. And then there's this thing called blend, which allows you to control where the voicing is being, or where the focus of the voices are, right? When we actually turn this knob in Serum, you can see when we turn it to the left that the two voices in the center, the amplitude is way up, and the voicing for the supporting voices out on the sides is turned way down. So it's a very center-focused sound. And if we invert that, where we bring the center down and make the sides wider, like this, now all of a sudden it sounds like a wide supportive pad. Kind of like a chorusy kind of effect, right? Blackberry is saying, so Paul, sine is a standard drill bit and a square wave is a spade drill bit and a sawtooth is a core or hole drill bit? Yeah, huh? Producer Gang, welcome in. Happy Monday to you. Yeah, the only wind-driven things I can think of with sustained release kind of get there using odd means. A didgeridoo relies on the player using circular breathing its size. Bagpipes has a bladder, the air. Yeah, exactly. Accordion, right? It's got the billows. Exactly. There's the requirement. That's why when I go back and I look at the definition of sound is amplitude, pitch, and timbre, and I say we need more than that. We need noise and silence and space as well, right? Because it's just not quite enough. You know, when we're talking sound design, obviously sound, yeah, we can get by with amplitude, pitch, and timbre. But when we're talking sound design, I really feel like we need that extra layer. And it's kind of akin to like primary and secondary colors or something. Sort of. It's more like white, black, and medium. So white is noise, black is silence, and the medium maybe is space. But I think that's a pretty important set to leave in our definition. Faux show. Yeah, BlackBerry. pipes as well. Absolutely. Kwame is here. What's up, dude? 14 voices equals battle of two supersaws. All right, so getting back to this then. Like, if you were actually going to be building a riser out of this, this would be a somewhat okay sound to start with, right? Because it's got some thickness and some movement. The pitch is being affected. Frequencies are being disclosed over time. It comes up to an agreeable sustained note. Like it's okay. What it doesn't really have though is noise or space in there. And you know, if we were designing a sound effect, it's probably the next thing that we would start doing at this point. If your shape is good, right? So let's just back up really quick. First shape, then voicing, then processing, right? Because listen to how much has already been accomplished without any processing, right? All right. So now if we were going to go in that direction, let's work with noise space or noise first. Okay, so just as a rule of thumb, when dealing with time-based effects, you want to be able to control what frequencies are flying around when and where, because they will affect other things in the mix, right? And it's one thing to create something, and it's another thing that when you create something that can work cooperatively with other things. It's going to save a lot of headaches, right? And it helps you maintain great control and understanding of your sounds too. So exercise this knowledge is basically what I'm saying. If you have the ability to do these things, do these things. Also, order of operations is very important. So typically I would feed delay into reverb. I would not reverberate or I would not delay the reverberated signal. I would reverberate the delayed signal. Okay, so order of operations and signal flow is pretty important. So let's go ahead and put a delay on this and see what this sounds like. This is a quarter note delay. Right, so there's a couple things here. While it's building up, the delay is starting to kind of interfere a little bit with the clarity of our sound in a few different points. So just kind of being aware of what's causing that is important, and bringing some of the conflicting frequencies out of the mix is the best way to solve that. So let's just listen to that again. Okay, so now the tail isn't as beefy, but the delivery of the sound was actually clearer, right? Now it's kind of a game of smoke and mirrors processing sounds after a certain point, just like mixing is, right? You might have a lot less actually making its way to the speakers in a final mix than what you had originally recorded, right? Because you're going to be chopping off big chunks of instruments, frequencies here and there to try to make everything fit well together in the big scheme of things. Same is true with sound design, just kind of understanding how to control what is happening to your sound, to what degree, at what time, in order to achieve the sound that you want. So removing those low frequencies is also going to make it easier for us to add some reverb to this. right? And we can hear that the delay pulses, those echoes, were in a shared reverberated space, right? So we've put this thing together in the right order of operations, really. I'm going to take out some of the lows in my reverb. Okay, so those are just like super, super basic rules of operation for sound design, right? Let's play a little bit with saturation now, because we do have an option of putting it before our time-based effects and after our time-based effects, okay? And what is going to be the effect, right? How will it affect the timbre, right? Everything we're doing is timbre, because we took care of shape really early on. Let's add distortion to this. And let's do maybe the stomp box so we can actually hear the effect of it. Now I'm going to put it after my reverb. And if you're listening really carefully, you can kind of hear that the entirety of the space, not just the sound in the space, but the space itself has been kind of excited. Let's put it up above all of those again. Listen to it one more time. So here's what I'm hearing. When the distortion is after the reverb, I can feel out on the edges of the sound, way back over here, I can feel this like agitation, this excitement, this movement, this kind of harmonic energy. When the distortion is before the reverb, what I can feel initially is a buildup, an accent of low frequencies that have been pushed to the side. That's what I can feel more than anything. And then I can feel this kind of swell of frequencies move through the frequency spectrum as the riser is building. And the reason is because what we're doing is we're saturating a cutoff, a filter sweep with a resonant peak. This is at 18%. So basically a 20% accent. It starts way down low and then it moves up the frequency spectrum and around as we're modulating up through the cutoff. And that has now been saturated and then delayed and then reverberated. Right? So what we hear is this kind of swollen movement of frequencies going up versus us hearing the same frequencies that were going up before, but it's all happening inside of this excited space. Right? Now that's a fairly mundane kind of vanilla distortion to add there. Let's add a sine fold. Let's just bring this down a little bit so it's not too crazy. Let's try that again. This is before the reverb. Now this is after the reverb. So there were actually some things that I really didn't like in that. The delay tail, the echoes was kind of getting whipped by this distortion. And because it's such noisy, disruptive distortion, it was creating some sort of like this noisy little bite each time one of those hit. So there's going to be a different outcome, not just in timbre from like one distortion type to the next, but from one sound to the next, because that little noise artifact is going to be different with every single kind of sound, right? Something else is going to trigger it. Sometimes it's going to be amplitude based, sometimes it'll be frequency based, sometimes it'll be timing based, right? Because when you have delays working, you've got frequencies just kind of appearing here and there, and they're colliding with other frequencies that were already traveling in that same time and space. And when those small collisions occur, and you also simultaneously have a lot of distortion or saturation, it's going to grab onto those things and it's going to do to them exactly what it does to everything else. And that is exploit an accent by piling on overtones, okay, harmonics. And you're going to hear those things in a way that you simply did not before. So it's so important. Just like I was saying, when you're working on your sounds, not to classify them in a way that restricts you from feeling like you should go up and down the octaves to hear how it performs. The same is true with auditioning different saturations and the point at which you're delivering that saturation in the signal flow, right? Because oftentimes you're going to find really great results at a few different points, and it only takes you a few seconds out of your life to bounce those as well, right? And especially if you're creating sound effects, like that's a treasure trove. The ability to just stop for a couple of seconds and bounce a variation really quick is a priceless little moment, right? Because you have no idea which sound that you bounce that day is going to be the next really beautiful gem, right? The same is true for instruments, like playable instruments. It's just that there's probably more steps involved in reaping the rewards of making these individual bounces. So what I usually tell people is just save variations or save versions of your preset as you work, right? So like as you stumble into something, you try to saturation, you try to distortion type, you don't like it for this particular song, but you really love the effect that it had, save it really quick. Just save it and then come back to it and work on it again. Yeah, BlackBerry's saying I would add localization to the list of what defines sound as well, as that influences the psychoacoustic interpretation of sounds. Yeah, I think I consider that to be space, personally, just in regards to noise, silence, and space, where what environment is it in, how much space is it consuming, our proximity to that thing. Oftentimes can be left like that may not be known until later in a project. But yeah, I like articulation as an inclusive word, expand on describing sound, the sort of trajectory or absence thereof of change, either from human performance or from modulation automation, as far as something to sit beside amp, pitch, tone, timbre. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, high index FM or wave shaping tends to sound much nicer on low frequency tones. The same intensity on higher pitch can be really shrill. Exactly. And herein lies a couple more little rules of thumb in the system. Less is almost always more. Almost always more. And keeping your sound as pure and simple for as long as you can, and getting whatever variations you can out of your sound before you take it any further, are the best assurances for getting really good sound out of this thing at the end. If you start with a sound that's really complex or overly processed in the beginning, then it's going to be really hard to arrive at something great later that is going to be applicable to a lot of projects or whatever. It's going to be very, very specific. But if you keep things really open and dry at first, then all of a sudden now you've got something that you could bounce, you could stretch, whatever. You could flip in 100 different ways before you even start processing it. And that's a pretty valuable habit to get into. The other thing that it brings up, besides the less is more thing, is the contrast. Like it's very important to have contrast. Like Iron Imp is saying, if you high index or wave shaping or wave shape a low tonal sound, oftentimes it's going to be great because you're like adding some squelch or rattle or crispiness or something to something that's low and washed out and slow and sluggish or moody or whatever. But doing those same things to something that's already operating in a fairly excited state just exasperates that. It's just too much. And when you start to think of these things in levels of excitement or something, when you shift the words that you're using to describe about these things, then you're thinking about these things differently, right? So when I say something like, if you're going to, impart a high FM index upon an already highly excited sound, it sounds like a bad idea. You know what I mean? It sounds like something that's going to be like, I don't know, that might be kind of shrill. You don't even have to finish the statement, right? But when you say something like, yeah, what about FMing a high-pitched sound? I don't know, let's do it. Maybe it'll work. I don't know, right? But like understanding the sounds to the point in which you can describe it to yourself in a way that helps you understand what you're going to get before you even get there, right? And you don't fully need to even understand what would even be happening in that FM synth at that point, right? You would just kind of have a basic understanding that, I don't know, this sound is maybe a little too high to even be going in that direction. Maybe instead I'll be reaching for some granular stuff on this one or something. But getting back to our flow here, you can, with the most basic of waveforms, arrive at pretty much any sound you can imagine. And you can do that with confidence, knowing that the more complex waveforms started as one of those simple waveforms, right? If you were to look at your waveform after messing with the voicing and adding some saturation and some reverb or whatever, it's not going to look anywhere near the same at all. So you've already arrived at a much more complex waveform. Starting with a simple waveform is just going to help you arrive at something that's a little easier to mold and manipulate. Okay, so we talked through that. We talked about expanding upon what sound is in its basic definition and adding the other archetypes. And then we've also talked about creating the four main synth instruments in the curriculum: the bass, the lead, the pad, the effects. And then we've talked about the difference between shaping through frequency and amplitude and the impact that it has upon timbre. And then we've even talked a little bit about some processing and order of processing. So now we should probably open this up for just like some general questions or whatever to see if there are any. And then it's probably just a matter of talking through a little bit more of envelopes and LFOs and how they relate to modulation and finding kind of the life in a sound before we actually even talk about all of the most common modulation maneuvers, right? Like before making any wubs or anything, I find it better to be talking about how do you make a sound move? Because it's still, after all of these years in the industry, it's still the one most common thing that I tell people when they ask for advice on their sound design work, whether it be in music or film or whatever. The very first time, and it's almost always more movement. There should be more movement in there. There should be something that's actually being delivered, not just happening, but there's something that's unfolding or something, because We don't want to generate content. Typically, we don't want to generate content that's entirely, that's, how do I put this? That's part of yet another entirely passive experience, right? We want to shift that paradigm. We want our listeners to be engaged participants on some level, right? We don't just want them to hear a sound, we want them to receive a sound. You know what I mean? We don't want them to see something on the screen. We want them to experience something on the screen, right? And we don't want them to hear that thing we did in that song. We want them to remember that thing that we did in that song. And all of those things are very different, right? They're just fundamentally different. And that it's the goal of most people is to have their stuff felt by other people, right? Not just heard, right? So I think that it's really important to just kind of talk through what movement and sound actually is before you start talking about modulation stuff in the bigger sense, because I think so often people are reaching for modulation and stuff is moving or beating or whatever, but it's all very predictable and it feels kind of canned, and it's not necessarily imparting more life, maybe more interest for sure, or activity, but I'm not sure about life all of the time. Yeah, literally move them vibrationally. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Heidi. Actually, yes. Paul, hey, I have these nails and a blackboard. I wonder if they'd sound nice together. Oh, Yamas TV, what's up, dude? Iron Imp says, for sure, I mean, even with drone bands, not everyone's thing, but the intent is still to be engaging enough to hypnotize and captivate. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So let's go back to absolute basics again, and let's just remake that same exact little bass that we did the very first time through, and figure out how to make it actually move. I believe we started with a sawtooth, and initially we just went with an amplitude shaping. That's a pretty lame bass. I don't really know many people who would be very inspired by that sound. Let's just take that same thing. We're going to make that same shape. We're going to put it on a filter instead. All of a sudden, it's already better. We're going to add a little more resonance because that's the funk, right? Okay, so now there's movement in there. But what if we could do just something a little bit more, just a tiny bit more? What if we took this same envelope and we put it on the fine pitch? And what if we detuned this just a little bit from itself? I don't know if I like the detuning on this one. It feels like it should be right in the middle. So let's just move on to the effects page here. Nah. Yeah, let's add some distortion. Let's go for that chunky one we were playing with before, the sine fold. All right, so I kind of like the beefiness that this adds, but it'd be cool if it moved too. So maybe just the drive, or maybe we could filter it. What if we find that wet beefiness that we like down here, and then we add that same envelope to the frequency control, the filter control of this. And then what if we had maybe just a touch of some delay in here? Maybe like a... All right, so now we've got a little bit of movement in here. We could try compressing if we feel we need to. If we want to use it as an effect just to shape the timbre of this, we could get really crunchy, accent some mids. This thing has a little movement in it now. Maybe bring down those highs a little bit. It's beefy. So it's you know, it's not too difficult. If we were to take off our distortion, delay, and compression, that bass feels really flat now, right? Adding things back one at a time. And just listening to the effect. Let's put the delay after the compressor. And again before. Hear that difference in there? So it really is just about like slowing yourself down and taking the time to just really focus in on what's the cause and effect of each thing that I'm doing, and A/B test these things in different signal flows, right? You know that you want to add what, right? That's what you should be asking yourself with each step. If you don't know, maybe you just don't do anything else. Knowing when to stop is definitely one of the hardest skills to master. And I say skill because there is this process of not just learning how to let go and stop, but also identifying when is appropriate to stop, right? Because we're only going to hurt things the more we go once we've reached the best possible thing, right? Identifying when that point is supremely important. So supremely important. It's so easy to keep going, and it's so easy to just want to continue to throw more things at it. And that is such a bad and poor choice so much of the time. Most of these types of sounds, especially in the music side of things, if we're just talking about making sounds for music, most of these sounds can be made very quickly and without too much hassle. It's the real nitty-gritty music sound design stuff, right? Dialing in the precise start and stop frequencies on a comb filter in a grimy respace or something like that. Like those things can consume a lot of time. But for the most part, a lot of these sounds can just be arrived at quite quickly. It's the stuff for screen and the stuff that's like heavily psychoacoustic that need to then operate within bigger mixes appropriately. Like that's the stuff that can take take more time. But it's so easy to just overthink and go too far down the rabbit hole. So it's really good just to kind of A B test these things as you go, right? Different signal path decisions. And then if you ask yourself when you get to the next thing, like, okay, what's next? If your answer is I don't know, or maybe nothing, then just stop. Just for the love of all that's right, just stop and appreciate what you have and come back to it again at a different time, right? Like go ahead and put it into the song, see what it sounds like. Don't make a final judgment that day. You know what I mean? Yes. Yes, Iron Imp, absolutely. A techno tuned shiatsu massage. A specific gripe I have with multi-voice detuning on certain things like Serum's default state or Synthtek's cloud generator is that the detune is both above and below the fundamental. I think Roland's JP8000 kind of nailed it the first time out by opening up the saw stack above the pitch frequency. You know, I agree with that. I agree with that. I like, yeah, I just like where your head's at with that one. Heidi says, "My God, just remembered the other day when I walked out of the Nine Inch Nails and David Bowie concert. My friend said, 'How do you feel?' And before I knew what healing energy felt like, I felt like I was swimming in waves and what I now know as blue, green, purple, completely peaceful but energized." And he was like, "Yeah, me too. But I'm always overexcited, amped after a show." Forever curious what actually happened. Yeah, you know, I was actually at that show and I know that feeling. I know that feeling. That was a great freaking show. That's like a super, super memorable show. That was the very first concert at the Rose Quarter, too. But yeah, you're right. There is this, like, you've just been drenched in all of this energy. But those are some greats that really spend a lot of time working on their timbre and like getting all of those things just perfect. Mm. Yeah, Iron Imp, perfectly said. Live music's great, but those really outstanding live shows are lifelong memories. Truly, truly. We conjured Roku successfully. We said respace, and our man appears. It's amazing. Dude lives on the other side of the planet, and he's just, poop, I'm here. Saf says, when I keep going with the sound, it sounded great, then I turn it to crap. I say, burn the bridges. Oh, time consumers, tuning sequencers, right? Right? Oh, man. Saf fell asleep for a few minutes. That's hilarious. Yeah, I was literally drenched as well. Big Charlie fan. Yep. Interesting to hear him talk about the creative process with Nine Inch Nails as opposed to his personal process with stuff like scoring the Saw franchise. Yeah, I bet. I bet it is, and it's always really interesting to hear the thoughts behind the impetus of a project, why it was approached differently than other projects, and what they wanted to either explore or convey, because it usually ends up being one or the other when artists like that are scoring, right? It's like, what do they want to explore or what do they want to convey? And I love just getting all of that insight. I love it. Oh, the some guy poured his water bottle on you. No. Oh no, that was most definitely a non-intentional pun. Ooh, Charlie was a guest on the Pro Synth Network channel, on their YouTube channel last year. I'll have to find that one. Oh. Okay, so what are some of the best benefits of the less is more thing? If you start, what's the best way to approach this conversation with music making in mind? Actually, well, while we've got a few people in the chat here, um, who is? Oh, let's just put up a chat, or I mean a poll, really quick. Where's my browser? There it is. Let's do a poll. Create new poll. Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to run this poll. We'll run this for 2 minutes. And it's just asking, what do you design sound for the most, music or screen? Because I'm curious as to those who are in the room right now. Oh, service error. Why? Why service error? All right, let's try that again. Manage poll. Oh, it did start. Why is Twitch telling me that it didn't start? Well then. Yeah, so what do you design in sounds for the most? Screen or music? The vocoder. Yes, very rich but restrained is a great way to describe that work. True, Paul, true. All right, so most people are wanting this stuff for music. So one of the many benefits of keeping stuff simple in your initial bounce is that you have new source material, source sounds, which is some of the most priceless stuff you can ever create for yourself musically. Because the more you use it in your projects, the more intimately aware you are of its potential, right? Both good and bad, right? And what do I mean by that? Well, remixing your own stuff or repurposing your own stuff is oftentimes how you're going to be able to figure out how other people arrive at a signature sound. And it's also going to help you develop the workflows that will ultimately produce and provide a lot of the greater continuity in your works. Because you're going to develop certain maneuvers and certain outcomes that you're going to want to replicate again and again. And the more you do that, the more ideas you have around it. And next thing you know, you've got a sound, right? So more often than not, it's going to benefit you to bounce really simple versions of stuff that you create and then find many ways in which you can use that stuff. Yeah, 80% music in here today. So you guys have seen me countless times take like a little bass note or something and put it into Shaper Box and come out with like a full on like danceable beat on the other side, right? And that's exactly what I'm talking about with like the whole less is more thing. The more stripped back, the more restraint you show and the quicker you are to identify your stopping points, the more secondary stopping points you can find with your sounds. I think that becomes more and more powerful the more deeply you know your tools and your desires, right? The better you can speak to your desires, the more you can work through intention to get to those places, the more liberated you are in your workflows, and you can then spend more time on discovery, which is, in my opinion, it should be like more than half the battle. It should be more than half of your work time is exploration and discovery. And if you are working with great intention in that very first phase of designing each sound and getting things into your arrangement window quickly, then chances are you're going to have a really satisfying exploration process, right? Because you're going to be given the outline of what you're working with, and then you can simply start plugging the sounds that you want into those placeholders in your arrangement window. Yeah, Iron M, absolutely. I've been so far down the rabbit hole of just sound for so long. I fully understand what you're saying. Yep, yep. Sound design for theater would be screen as well. Yeah, yep. But at the moment, I'm not working in sound, commercial game dev, or other stuff like I used to be. It's more of a passion and research and development, I guess. I see. Yeah, just exploring for the sake of exploring. That's a good passionate pursuit, honestly. I don't know that I'm ever really going to stop that. I think that it's like noodling. You know, like there are plenty of people that I know that will pick up a guitar and they're just going to sit there and they're going to noodle. They're going to let their mind drift and they're going to just like lean back in a chair and stare out the window and do this thing. And it's like a form of meditation or something. It's just like this little journey that they go on. To me, that's kind of like my noodling. Like I will just open up a sampler or a synth or something and just see where I end up. You know, I bet BlackBerry could keep us entertained for days just talking about his experiences. How many times have you seen a chorus line? Let's let's talk just briefly, since we made it through all of that stuff. Let's talk about the power of randomization. And um, it's something that we don't really talk about all that often, but most synths have some form of randomization that you can use. Um, and it's actually quite fun. Um, there's these different games that you can play. If there's no random button on your synth, but it's like a wavetable synth, right? You can play with tossing different wavetables into your um, your synth. Oh, really quick, backing up, I forgot to mention one of the most important parts of life, right? Like finding life, incorporating life into a sound, like I was mentioning, is utilizing a wavetable synth in a way that it was meant to be used. Um, and part of that would be modulating the wavetable position. But a lot of people feel um, uh, I guess like a sense of intimidation around making edits to wavetables and stuff, and you really don't need to. So I thought that I'd show you just one really basic form of wavetable editing that can really just be a first step for you. Um, we're going to go ahead and click on this little edit pencil here, and let's just delete these guys here. We'll just delete those guys. All right, so we have two wavetables here, or I mean two waveforms here. We have a sine wave and we have a sawtooth wave. And if we were to morph these together, let's do a crossfade. Now what we're going to get is a morphable version. We have a sawtooth on one side and a sine wave on the other. And adding some life to a sound can be as simple as modulating the wavetable position just a little bit. That actually sounds pretty good. And this would actually make this sound a little bit more stable because we're airing toward the sine wave at the amplitude peak. Here's our peak. We're dipping down toward a sine wave, and you can see that here. Anyway, just thought I'd throw that out there since I just remembered. We will run through this process a whole bunch more times as we run through the curriculum, but making your wave move in the oscillator is pretty essential these days if you're wanting some form of like life force in your sound, I think. Several hundred times. Oh. Yeah, that's a lot of times to see a chorus line. Man. Um, yeah, I think that really is it for the basics. Okay, so each week when we have one of these little deep dives in this, I want to circle back and add some stuff to the Discord to keep a conversation going. But then I also want to challenge you guys with like a little bit of personal homework that you can do on your own. Nothing that you ever have to turn in anywhere. But just for the sake of just going through the process, going through the motions, we learn through rote is really what it comes down to. All right, so in the classroom at this point, I'm just asking people to identify things that they like, that they're hoping that they can create themselves at some point, and then challenging people to make things from scratch with just basic waveforms in whatever synth they are most comfortable in. So this is basically what it says. Share some of your favorite of each of the core four across two different genres of music. What can you do with a synth? Try your hand at making each of the core four sounds in any soft synth of your choosing. So I would actually challenge you guys, since all of you have been producing music for a bit, I would challenge you guys to kind of combine these two. Seek out some stuff that you want to be able to create across at least a couple different of genres, and then try to make each of the core four sounds in each of those genre styles. Don't try to recreate the sounds if they're really complex sounds and you don't want to like hit a wall and get frustrated, but just try making a bass, a lead, a pad, and effects in each of those genre styles. And see how it goes. Now, if you've been producing music of a certain style for quite a long time, I would consider it to be not very helpful to you if you were to just make those types of sounds. So I would pick two genres of music that you are not accustomed to producing in, and try to make a small handful of sounds for each one. And how do you know if they can work in that type of genre? Just make a little ditty, like a little 4-bar or something like that with your sounds, just to see if you can kind of approximate what would be happening in like a little 4-bar from that genre. And it's a really clunky process at first, and it feels kind of out of sorts. But in an effort to get through this a few times, one thing that can help you get there quickly is focusing on the order of operations that we were talking about today, and try to see if working in this specific kind of workflow might actually help you. So start out with the shape, and then work on the voicing, and then lastly move on to the timbre, and see just how quickly you can arrive at the core 4, bass, lead, pad, and effects for those 2 different genres that you've selected. If you would like to post homework in the Discord, we can do that. I can create a channel on the Discord for this, and I can also paste in what we've been talking about through here today. And then we can keep this conversation going in between streams. So I'm trying to find a really good rotation for the live streams. I want to keep Friday's feedback because so many people are growing so much because of that specifically. And I'd also love to dedicate a good chunk of each week to the education stuff. So I'm thinking maybe Mondays we start off with the learning stuff. So you guys kind of have all week to spend exploring whatever we're getting into, because it does get better. It does get less basic. And then Wednesday, I was thinking could be the main production day, and just kind of making it fun and challenging and bringing in audio design desk for a bunch of it. So we can start like scoring some scenes and I don't know, just making music in a totally different tool. I think that's always good for learning and whatnot. I know a lot of people that have moved from something else into game dev, and I know just as many people that have moved out of game dev into something else. All right, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to create a Discord, and we'll leave that public. All right, let's I guess just a text channel here. What should we call this? Just learning? Community learning? Learning together? Learning together. Let's just do that. All right, so I'm going to paste in the stuff here. See how this pastes. I don't know if this is going to work too well. Nope, it didn't. That's too bad. Maybe what I'll do is post these as little attachments and as text. So I'll go through and I'll post this and I'll style it a little bit better, because if I just post it in there now, it's going to be one big brick of text. Lab of ohms. Classroom. Hey, that's good. I like classroom. That's good. All right. And I'll dial in the description and stuff for that later. So in classroom, and we can put that, let's see here. things have gotten kind of out of sorts again. Let's put public lounge up at the top. Let's put classroom. Next to it, where to go right here. We'll put that here. And let's put our monthly challenge submissions here. Subscriber rewards. All right, subscriber rewards now way up at the top. I need to go through and trim some of these out. Rats equal squirrels. Hey, what's up, Trailer? Welcome back. Hip hop plucks and basses. There you go, Saf. That's the spirit. Gifts of knowledge that will last a lifetime. It could be called omnipresence. Omnipresence. Oh man, that's classic. That's some good stuff right there. Oh, and I see several of you actually have DMs waiting to be responded to, so I'll get back to those today as well. All right. So next thing you'll hear is some updates on the Discord for this. And when we reconvene on Wednesday, we'll do probably some fun scene scoring. So if you want to start prowling for video clips, you can do that. I'm going to put found sounds, found videos. I'm going to put the found videos right next to found sounds. So the way that this works is if you have a video, if you find a video that you want to put into the queue for us to work on, in other words, put music to, create sound effects for, whatever, post them in found videos. If you have sounds for us to use and you want us to use those in some scoring or some sound design projects or whatever, post them in found sounds. Uncle Chrome. Oh, that's a good one. That is a good one. Iron Imp, thank you. Thank you for hanging out. Let's oh. Sorry, a good Princess Bride meme always gets me. As you wish. All right, let's go see who's streaming. Let's see who we can raid. Da, 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 da. Hey, let's go see Gammy. We haven't seen him in a long time. Let's go do that. Always a good time. All right, we're going to go raid him. He's fun. Thank you all for spending time. Happy MLK Day. We'll see you again on Hump Day. On Wednesday, we'll dig back into some fun stuff. Don't forget to post some really fun video clips and fun found sounds to the Discord, and we'll play with those on Wednesday. Appreciate you guys. I'll see you on the flip. Peace out.
OhmLab with a raid. What's up? Welcome to the stream, guys. Hope you had a good stream. What did OhmLab do in his stream? What's up? What's up, Jason? Hey, we're just getting started, to be fair. We're working on making songs for my new album, Chaos Emerald. It's very inspired. I want that feeling. Honestly, somebody asked me what feeling I want to do with this album. It's the feeling I had when I played Sonic Adventure 2 Battle as a kid. Just nostalgic. I want it to sound nostalgic, you know? Like I can show you some beats of it. Like for example, this one. Like, can you hear it?